Hey everyone, Simon here from Top Tennis Training, and in this video we're going to break down and analyze the Nick Kyrgios serve. Now Nick has one of the best serves in the world, and in this video we're going to look at the three main things that for me really make his serve unique. And number one is his weight transfer, the way he's able to transfer his weight from the front to the back and then into the service motion. Number two is his ball toss and how this has a huge effect on his serve. And number three is his disguise, the ability for him to disguise where he's going with what type of spin he's going and make his serve really unreadable. So at the start of Nick's serve, he'll start off with a very wide base. And this is very important because this wide base will help him to really feel the weight transfer between the front and the back foot. So his left foot into the right foot. As he starts his motion, he'll have his racket quite low, like this, but he's also having about 80% of his body weight on this left leg to begin. So it's around 80% of his body weight on this left leg, and then as he starts to swing, it will then shift onto the back leg. So it's going from a dominant left leg position to a dominant right leg. So he's going from here to here. And this rocking motion is creating momentum, almost like a pendulum. If you think the pendulum goes up and down, he's building that momentum by having that rocking motion. So he's starting off on the front foot, and then he has that weight transfer, and this wide base is something that we've seen before with players like Richard Krajicek and Goran Ivanisevic, two of the best servers of all time. Nick does the exact same thing, and this wide base will help him to really feel that weight transfer during the motion. Now someone who uses a more narrow pinpoint stance, when they start the motion, they can't really exaggerate that rocking motion. Because my feet are quite close together, it's hard for me to feel that massive weight transfer. Whereas if I have a wide base, now it's very easy. I can feel that I'm left leg dominant, right leg dominant, left leg dominant, right leg dominant. This is exactly what Nick does on his serve. Now because he doesn't have a pause in the motion, and because he has a very quick service action, he's always building up momentum, and this allows him to really push off the ground and propel himself into that contact point. Too often what happens with club players when they're using that pinpoint stance is they'll have a break somewhere along the kinetic chain. So they'll start off good, they'll build up some sort of momentum, and normally when they reach that trophy position, they'll stop, they'll have a slight pause. This pause doesn't have to be long, but if you have a slight pause, you're breaking that momentum. Back to that pendulum. If someone grabs a pendulum at one side, it then has to reset. It's almost like resetting, pressing a reset button. So if you're someone who's using that pinpoint serve, but you're having a pause, you might as well serve from where you're having that pause. You're building momentum, and then you've lost it. Whereas with Nick, he's continuously building that momentum, and he's able to really feel that weight transfer and really jump into the motion because of that continuous motion. The second key to Nick's serve is his ball toss. Now Nick tosses the ball quite low. He's tossing that ball and hitting it very quickly. So if you think about his timing, this toss hit rhythm, if I have a high ball toss and I toss the ball, this toss hit will be like this. Toss, hit. Whereas with Nick, it's toss, hit. So it's a very quick motion because of this ball toss. Now what this does, having a lower ball toss and hitting the ball close to the peak, this does two main things. The first one is it takes away any waiting time. There's no unnecessary waiting in the motion. If I toss the ball quite high, I have to then have a pause somewhere along the motion because I have to wait for the ball to come down to my ideal contact point. So the higher I throw the ball, the longer I have to pause somewhere in that kinetic chain. But if I have the ball quite low, just above my contact point, I have no waiting time. So there's no waiting around, there's no breaks in that motion. And this is exactly what Nick does. He's tossing the ball and he's hitting it very close to the peak. The second thing this does is it takes away the wind and the elements. So if you have a high ball toss, it might work indoors, but if you're playing outdoors, the wind's going to start blowing it around and your ball toss is going to become very inconsistent. Nick never has this problem because his ball toss is low. The third thing this does is it makes his serve very hard to read because his opponent has very little time to pick up on the slight differences in the ball toss and in the position of his body. The higher you throw the ball, the faster it's traveling when it comes down to your contact zone. So if I throw the ball 6 feet higher than I'm actually hitting the ball, which is very common at club level, you'll see this all the time. Players tossing the ball really high and then the ball's traveling down with quite a bit of speed. The higher I throw it, the more speed it picks up before my contact zone. So not only have you made that ball toss more unreliable because it's higher, it's harder to feel and place that ball, but it's also now traveling down with speed. So you've made it harder for you to time. Now if you can hit the ball close to the peak, the ball's traveling up, there's a slight pause where it stays on the spot for a few milliseconds before it starts to drop. The closer I can hit it to that slight pause, the slower it's going to be traveling. So it's going up, it has a slight pause, and it comes down. So it's almost like someone's holding that ball there for me so that I can make a clean contact point compared to a ball that's traveling at 50 miles an hour because I've thrown it so high. So by having that lower ball toss, Nick has those two main benefits. He's not having to deal with the wind, and he's also building up momentum without having those pauses along the motion. So hitting the ball close to that peak is one of the easiest ways to ensure that you have a clean contact point, and this is exactly what Nick does on his serve. And the third thing that makes Nick's serve so good and effective is the disguise. Now his ability to disguise his serve makes it so hard for the opponents to deal with because they have no idea where he's going.
Yay.
Now this great disguise comes down to two main factors. The first one is his lower ball toss, and the second one is the speed at which he goes through the entire motion. So the first one being that lower ball toss, the higher you toss the ball, the more time your opponent has to see that ball toss. So if you toss the ball slightly more to the right and you're going to go for that slight serve, they might pick up on it. If you're tossing the ball more to your left, they'll see that you're probably going to kick that serve. So the higher you throw the ball, the more time your opponent has to pick up on those slight differences in that ball toss. The second thing is because of the speed of his motion, it makes it very hard for the opponent to pick up on slight differences in the technique. So a good returner will look for clues with your body and your ball toss. They'll firstly look at where you're tossing the ball, but they'll secondly look at the positioning of your shoulders, the positioning of the hips, and also how you open up as you serve. So if your motion is quite slow and you have a pause in that back position, your opponent is more likely to read on those slight differences. Whereas with the fast motion, someone like Nick, it becomes very hard to read because he's going through that motion so quickly. So it becomes unreadable and they won't be able to pick up on those slight differences. So Nick's great serve really comes down to the fact that he has a very quick motion. If he had the same technique, but he was slower going through the motion and he had a higher ball toss, he'd lose the power, he wouldn't have the same amount of power because he's building up that momentum with his fast motion, And if he had a slower motion, he wouldn't have that same racket head speed. But more importantly, he would lose that disguise. And the disguise is one of the most important elements of his serve. So those are 3 things that anybody can incorporate into their serve and see a massive difference in the power and also the disguise on their serve. So the first thing being that rocking motion. If you're someone who uses that pinpoint stance, feel like you have a slightly wider base and feel that you're building momentum through that weight transfer, front leg, back leg, to both legs being together. The second thing being that lower ball toss. Instead of throwing the ball so high, throw the ball to just around that peak and see if you can make contact around that time where the ball has stopped. And the third thing is the disguise by having a faster motion. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video and learned something new. Now if you have enjoyed it, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and please make sure you turn on that notification bell so you get our latest videos as soon as we release them. Now if you have any videos that you'd like to see from us in the near future, leave a comment down below and tell us what you'd like to see. Signing off, Simon from T2T. All the best and see you soon, guys.